right. So, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, for attending our Philippine stock market wrap up. So there was a two-month hiatus, of this market wrap up. Of course, last month we had our rounds of presenting our outlook and top picks for the year to our clients and of course to you virtually, And actually, when we presented our top picks, we realized na we haven't focused or we haven't elaborated on our outlook per sector. And this is actually the opportunity for me to present our outlook per sector, right? But of course, let's discuss first the usual. Let's discuss what happened in the month of Feb, what to watch out for in March, and then sector overview, and then we'll provide some key traders playbook reports. Okay, so what happened in the month of Feb? So in Feb, the PSA actually ended lower by 3.5%, and yesterday it closed at 6,556.20. And year to date, if you exclude the March one, right, this is year to date from January to Feb, the market is down by 0.15%. So imagine, right, the market went as high as around above 7,000 right now. The market is at 6,600. So how quick the market went up and pulled back. So I'd like to discuss the reasons why the market pulled back. So first is global inflation data continue to exceed expectations, right? It's not only the Philippines that where inflation data was above consensus expectations and even above BSP's expectation. But for example, if you take a look at in the US, inflation there are a lot of inflation related data there. It exceeded expectations. Meron yung inflation itself, meron core personal consumption expenditure is what the central bank focuses on. So exceeded expectations. And there was some time couple of weeks ago where the Philippine market underperformed. And it was because that was a time the BSP adjusted its inflation forecast for the year to 6.1% from 4.5%. So imagine 2023 inflation, 4.5%, and then you hike it to 6.1%. That's a huge increase in forecast. And then for 2024, they also increased it from 2.8 to 3.1%, right? And of course, there were other reasons. Of course, given the higher than expected inflation, the global central banks remain hawkish because that's one of their mandate to price stability, diba? So they have to control inflation. They have different targets. So for example, see US 2%. For the Philippines, I believe it's 2.5 to 4.5%, right? And then lastly, there was a downweight for the Philippines in the MSCI semi-annual rebalancing. That's why you noticed the huge volume yesterday. It's usually like that ahead of the effective date, which is the first day of the month. There's huge volume. And MSCI rebalancing usually every Feb, May, August, and November. And then the effectivity is the last day of Feb, usually Feb, May, August, November. So expect large volume from there. And then usually the day after, like today, March 1, the price normalized, umakyat yung market, right? So in terms of price action, if you take a look at price action, the market today ended above 6,600, which is actually support, right? So let's try to zoom it a bit, right? So if you take a look at the price action, the red line that you see there, that's the moving average. That's the 200-day moving average. And the green one, that's the 50-day. Or that's the 100-day moving average. So you can see that that's acting as a support right now, along with the 6,600 level. But if you take a look at your RSI, probably baka oversold bounce lang. Perhaps it could just be a dead cat. Hopefully not, but it takes more days to really confirm whether this is a rebound or not, right? So for us, the entry is not even if you can see a lot of support levels there, the 100-day, 200-day, the 6,600. If for us, once the market trades back above 6,800, that's the time na it's more convincing that the market, that was a healthy pullback lang, right? So right now, we can't say yet because it's still quite choppy and looks like leaning towards the downside pa. So what do you watch out now for March? Right. So inflation data, number one inflation data talaga. So at the latter part of one of the last bullets there, I will mention the dates on when inflation will be released, but inflation data number one. Because the main reason why the market went up noong January was the expectation inflation will peak, hence interest rates will peak. And then, of course, lower interest rates or expectation of lower interest rates is one of the best reasons to buy equities. But just so happen, inflation na seems like has yet to peak. So now, this is where the market is basing on price action. The language of the central banks on monetary policy. Will they slow down rates? Best case scenario, will they already send a message when they will cut rates? And of course, possibility of an economic slowdown recession. We barely hear, of course, from central banks na, magkaka-recession. Not necessarily, but if you try to decipher their message, the possibility of an economic slowdown, that's what we have to listen to, understand. Of course, we have, through our reports, to our daily reports, we can see the news, the snippets on how or what are they saying currently, okay? Geopolitics still. Geopolitics like last month, meron sa Philippines and China. And then there's currently US-China as well. China-Taiwan, something to watch. So, of course, Ukraine-Russia is still definitely a factor, right? It's not getting any better. So that's definitely a factor. One of the main causes of inflation shot up last year. And then right now, we're still feeling the brunt of it. Right. So geopolitics still something to watch out for. And then TH in US corporate earnings and outlook. Right. So right now, full year earnings. And then starting April, first quarter agad yan, 2023. And of course, again, the usual tip that we share to our clients is you don't only look at corporate earnings growth. You look at if it exceeded, if it's in line or below consensus expectation. Consensus expectations is based from analyst estimates like us, but we're just one of those, right? So how do you know if a company exceeded estimates or not? You take a look at our reports, right? Of course, for US, what's also important to them is yung outlook. Because in the US, they give outlooks agad eh. And if the outlook did not meet expectations, may ganun na, di lang earnings. If their outlook did not meet analyst expectations, the share price will adjust, right? And may pre-market pa sa US, so nag-adjust siya even before it opens, right? So, but the bottom line there is once you see the sectors outperforming, underperforming the US, you can also see a gauge on how it will fare here in the Philippines, right? So, continue to look at that. And then in terms of economic data, I highlighted here inflation. For Philippines, it's March 7 next Tuesday. For US, March 14th. For EU, tomorrow. And then other for Philippines, oil remittances, unemployment rate, central bank. There's also a lot of central bank interest rate decisions this month. So this month is actually important. Let's end the quarter with a clearer path towards where they will go. Diba? Mag-hike ba or not? I mean, mag-hike, how much do they need to hike pa? And then for US, central bank decision also March 23rd, jobs report March 10th. And then, yeah, as mentioned, March 10, March 16 for Japan and EU respectively. Okay. And then in terms of sector overview, this give me some time to discuss our outlook per sector. We didn't really elaborate on this one on the virtual event that we held like 3 weeks ago, right? So let's talk about the financial sector. The financial sector, there's definitely room to ramp up loans. Because during the pandemic, just to give reference, during the pandemic, there's what we call non-performing loans. It went up significantly. Non-performing loans, usually ito yung mga likely or already have defaulted na loans. And there are, if you take a look at the bank's data, you can really separate the men from the boys because there are banks that have significantly higher non-performing loans as compared to the bigger banks na their non-performing loans are well higher than historically but way lower than the other smaller banks. The bottom line is as time went by during the course of the pandemic, it normalized. So now, they have now room to ramp up loans. But it still hinges on economic conditions because if there's an expectation of economic slowdown or worse recession, diba, yung loan demand will definitely be affected. Even if loan growth is expected to recover this year, it may decelerate as compared to last year, right? And of course, I just like to be clear in terms of expectation of recession. Here's the Philippines, unlikely. economic slowdown yung likely, but the recession, which is defined by 2 straight quarters of negative growth, di ba? We felt that nung COVID, 2 quarters. But in terms of recession this time around, it will likely mostly be in US or EU. But nevertheless, we will be affected kasi globalization naman na. So what we expect here is economic slowdown. So now next, net interest margins will continue to expand under the current interest rate environment. Meaning, since mataas yung interest rate, di ba? Usually, there's a spread na dun yung para nanggagaling yung mga revenues ng banks eh. But the bottom line in here is, of course, you can only increase interest rate so much. At the end of the day, people will realize now it's too expensive to borrow. Nevertheless, this time around, there's upside sa margins ng banks. Right? And I would like to focus on the fourth point here, that the efficiency gains during the pandemic will remain sticky because the banks have focused or expedited their digitalization efforts, di ba? And the apps are getting better, mas maganda ng integration like within the other fintech platforms, fintech apps, right? So that will help the banks in terms of their cost efficiency moving forward. So that will remain to be seen. So in terms of, this is a chart that we see for those listening sa Spotify or watching sa YouTube, you can see this. No? But for those listening to Spotify, we're showing here like a graph of interest-free loan growth and net interest margin, how it's rebounding since the lows of the pandemic, right? And then our buy calls for the sector are the following: BPI, BDO, and Security Bank. Actually, for BDO, for transparency purpose, I showed here 148 because I would like to emphasize now from 148 after the stock dividend, it's around 123, I believe. Around 123 yata. Yun. So the bottom line there is for BPI and BDO, there's not much upside currently. But for Security Bank, there's an upside at around 109 pesos. Right? So for Security Bank, that's actually one of our top picks, as you've mentioned before. But the bottom line here is we have other buy calls. It's just that di namin sila top pick because the upside is limited and they're relatively expensive. So that's for the financial sector. For the consumer sector, we mentioned in our outlook na we see demand to be resilient in the early part of 2023. Of course, economic-wise, there's minimum wage increases, planned tax cuts that could provide tailwinds to consumption. And of course, we showed this, diba, na this is from the train law na yung beneficiary of this one. I mean, everyone benefits, but who benefits the most? Those earning over 800K to 8 million a year. And these are your middle to high income levels. So of course, one of our topics kasi RHI, where their target is mid to high income level. So that diba, it all comes to play na in terms of why will RHI continue to outperform despite inflation. So there. And then of course, we highlighted here na yung savings are lower, credit card debt is getting higher. It can easily be argued na people are spending. Diba? People are spending kaya bumababa yung savings, tumataas yung credit card debt kasi mas nagbaborrow, mas nagsispend ka to meet with your friends, hang out with family more. But this slide is a sign of household balance sheet stress emerging. This is where salary loans are picking up at an uncomfortable pace. So the bottom line here is unemployment is at a pre-COVID level, which is good. Headline, when you hear it, unemployment back to pre-COVID levels, it seems like it's good news, right? But why are salary loans picking up? Nearly doubled in 2022. Meaning, sa taas ng inflation, di na enough yung kinikita monthly, right? Because higher expenses, your salary, while it is increasing, it's not not at the pace of your higher costs. Diba? So that's like a sign of household balance sheet stress emerging, right? So but we remain positive on the sector, of course on select names, until these early signs of stress become more pronounced. Hence we remain selective. One of the key trends, down trading. So household will focus on essentials, revert to value-oriented labels. Diba? There's a shift to cheaper private label alternatives. So we mentioned down trading, one example. For example, dati, kung nagsa-Starbucks ka once or twice a week, ngayon once or twice a month na lang, or you shift to making your coffee at home or 3-in-1. That's example. We're also seeing, of course, return to office school to show the family's expenses will shift to transportation, allowance, clothing, diba? So yung mga department stores to benefit. Revenge spending is definitely still a trend, but the point, our point is eventually it will wane kasi nga taas ng inflation. Nevertheless, revenge spending is still seen right now within the country, diba? You fly and then it could be outside the country, or you just want to go out, revenge spending like sa malls, diba? So mall foot traffic is already back to pre-COVID levels, so way higher than pre-COVID levels, so that's good. Hence, our top picks for the sector are CNPF, RHI, URC. And if you watched our event, in virtual event, these are our defensive names, our theme number 1. For the property sector, it's divided among 3 sub-segments, about residential, malls, and office. So let's discuss our outlook for each of the sub-segments rather. So for residential, we're not so positive because the demand headwinds are clear, higher interest rate, and if magka-recession sa other parts of the world, that could be a downside risk to remittances, right? And nung pandemic, there was this provision in Bayanihan Law where yung mga bumibili ng property pwede ma-delay yung payment, right? Mga prepayments. So when that provision in Bayanihan Law was lifted in 2021, mid-2021, ang daming hindi kaya makabayad. Right. So that resulted in vacancies. So of course, in the minds of the developers, they had to fill up those inventory first. Hence, we expect developers to push back yung next launches until unwind yung build-up in residential inventory. Right. So that's one of our expectation. And this is a graph showing aggregate launches of property names under coverage are only hovering at around 25 to 30% of 2019 levels. Right. So we're far away from pre-COVID levels in terms of launches. Okay. For office, we're not so positive also because there's a risk of high vacancy rates amid greater adoption of work from home. But of course, for office names, or at least for the property names, their office segment, you can easily separate the men from the boys there kasi may huge disparity in terms of names, in terms of the occupancy rates of select names and then other names. So we prefer the bigger ones. So of course, we see the greater adoption of work from home to put pressure on rental rates. So this will warrant a recalibration of office expansion plans, right? So despite BPOs and traditional office leases being in business as usual mode, the need for office space could lag growth in manpower requirements in the face of greater adoption of work from home. So this is another graph showing the slow recovery in occupancy rates, which suggests weakness in demand for office spaces. So malayo pa siya sa 100%, at least for select names. And then for malls, we're positive. Full rental rates have been reinstated kasi in second half of 2022. Diba? You recall nung pandemic, may nag-provide ng rental reprieve, right? If you recall sa mga tenants sa malls. So right now, it's now reinstated in the second half of the year, last year. So the segment is actually on track to revert to pre-COVID levels this year. So if you take a look at this slide, as of third quarter, for example, for Ayala Land, it's 96% of pre-COVID levels already. SM Prime over 100%, for Robinsons Land 90%. So, diba? So that's good. Hence, our topics for the sector are RLC and SM Prime. For RLC, one of the undervalued names. For SM Prime, note that 60 to 70% of their operating income comes from malls. So that's why it's one of our buy picks. But our top pick as a whole, si RLC. For telco sectors, it's interesting. It's interesting, right? But the bottom line here, sir, theme is competition is rising. And there are several themes, no? Like first, the continued cannibalization of voice and SMS. Because right now, there's an increased use in Viber, WhatsApp, Messenger. So data over in texting, SMS, diba? So that's one, right? So there's a shift to data, shift to other apps where you use data rather than yung text yung magpapaload ka. So let's move on to data. There's also a challenge there because in terms of the companies, kasi for example, we can now buy more data at the same price or lower price as before, right? So of course that's good for us, but in terms of the telcos, it's challenging for them to how to make money on those, especially competition. Like yung other telco provider lang magbaba ng price, di ba? Syempre kailangan nila match or else the customers can quickly shift especially now, right? The mobile number portability law, SIM registration card, that makes it easier to shift from PLDT to Globe, Globe to dito, vice versa. There are a lot of unfavorable impact of recent regulatory events to incumbents, like what I've mentioned. Diba? And of course, we can't deny the fact na si Dito Telecom, while it's not one of our vehicles, it's definitely the competition. It's eating the mobile market share, the market share in the mobile segment, right? So those are reasons why competition is significantly rising sa telco sector. So it's still there. Tapos meron pa yung right, yung 100% foreign ownership, right? So that's definitely a challenge moving forward. I think si Starlink nga nandito na sa Philippines. So it seems like the price is mostly focused on for the high income level. Nevertheless, still a competition. Diba? So yeah, as mentioned here, si Dito Tel, if you see here sa slide, nearly 8% na siya as of 9 months in terms of number of subscribers. And then yeah, SIM Registration Act, diba? It can affect the effect here is reduction overall mobile subscribers. You recall yung mga nagte-text sa atin ng gaming related, casino, jackpot, etc. na those will likely be omitted already. But that's a good effect of SIM Registration Act, hopefully. Yeah, so here, ito naman yung forecast for mobile market share split dito from 8% now to 11% in 2024. So the mobile segment will remain competitive. So our vehicle for the sector is PLDT. Of course, we understand the recent challenges for PLDT, but if you take a look at our target price is 1,550. So not, as compared to before, diba sa 2,000, 3,000 siya. Nevertheless, for Globe kasi, while there's an upside sa long term sa GCash, right now kasi mostly sa mobile pa rin siya kumikita. And as mentioned, the mobile business is heavily competitive right now. For PLDT kasi the home broadband business is something na they're leading and can fully take advantage. For the power sector, our theme here is seizing the renewable energy boom, right? Of course, we'll discuss that in a while. But the bottom line here is electricity consumption is on track to reach new highs. So, noong 2020, the story was residential. Kasi nasa bahay tayo lahat So, residential demand is driving electricity consumption. And then, 2021, slightly reopened yung mga industrial, yung mga food and beverage, yung mga manufacturing, right? And then 2022, yan na yung mga hotels, school, right? And then 2022 all come together, like especially commercial and industrial, right? But we have to take into account the additional dependable capacity is important. Because right now, yung bottom line here is supply. Because if you, based on what I recently read, na yung margin between demand and supply is quite thin. So for example, if magkaroon ng shutdown, yung ilang plants, magkakaroon na agad ng yellow alert kasi meaning demand has already overweighed supply. So kailangan na ng forced brownouts, diba? That being said, given that the supply is quite thin, there will be incoming supply, but as of now, not much pa. That being said, we expect electricity price to remain elevated. And you can see the prices be reflected sa spot market prices. Diba parang siyang stock market for electricity prices. So expected to remain elevated in the next 12 months. This is in the slides you will see there yung increasing share of commercial industrial post-pandemic, and then yung electricity consumption per region, diba? Hindi lang Luzon na, the Mindanao, Visayas grid showing increased demand, especially a lot of business are going there because given the opportunity. So moving on to the mix. Fossil fuels will still dominate the energy mix, whilst coal will still remain to be king, at least in the most part of this decade. We have to remember na last year, after the Ukraine-Russia, we realized that we have to have a mix between coal and renewable energy. I mean, renewable energy is the future, parang present na rin, future and present, right? But we come to realize na it can't fill up yung baseload capacity. So coal, it has to be a mix, diba? Yun yung point. But of course, moving forward, over-dependence on coal exposes companies with coal-fired power plants to price volatility. That's where the viability of renewable energy will come in. For the Philippines case, of course, the government is backing that up. May support, right? Yung goal nga by 2030, 35% of the country's energy mix, renewable energy, di ba? And then for the Philippines case, solar and wind, yung mostly capacity that will come in under the renewable energy side. So of course, what is important also, may battery energy storage system kasi dun masastore yung energy. Yun nga yung viability ng REA. It can be stored. But you have to have this battery energy storage system. So this is a chart showing the expectation in the supply by 2040, diba? So mostly RE. So our pick for this sector is Siri, right? But of course, if you want other power sector names, we always write on those through our Tejas Playbook report. So you can use those as guidance. So now, our 2020 year target and topics are the following. So this, just to highlight lang or emphasize, this is what ito yung base case target namin is 6,700. Then we have 3 themes: defensive names, ECNPF, RHI, URC, beneficiaries of central bank pivots, the REITs. Of course, the beneficiary central bank pivot is the expectation na magsuslow down na increase ng rates or magsastop na increase ng rates. Of course, for now, we have to be a bit more patient for the REITs, but nevertheless, something to put on our watch list. And then undervalued names are seen secondly. Of course, we can recommend Metrobank since we're part of the group. Right, but the bottom line here is Metrobank is also one of the cheaper names, like Security Bank. So in terms of our key traders playbook reports, now this is year to date, hit ratio is around 56%. Parang 5 out of 9. Diba? As in start of the year, puro hit kasi good January, but during Feb, a lot of names have hit our stop loss. So hopefully this improves. So in terms of our key traders playbook reports, we have Meralco. Now we just released earlier today. Diba? So from Meralco, earnings came in above consensus estimates. So didn't just grow. The earnings did not just grow, it exceeded estimates. And right now, si Meralco is not just a power distribution company, its generation business is already contributing a lot sa business. Something that's an upside for Meralco. Here's the chart now where we're telling now you buy once it breaks above 320. If you want a more in-depth analysis, now take a look at what we post sa website namin on our traders playbook. Of course, RSC also trading near its 52-week close. Parang buy low, sell high strategy. But of course, RSC is one of our long-term picks anyway. But the emphasis here is for long-term investors. And this is also an opportunity to buy na kasi nga trading near its 52-week close, usually support near 14.50. Take advantage. If it breaks below 14.50 for traders, you can cut loss. All right. I'll go back to this slide. This is one of the requests to go back to this slide probably para ma-screenshot. So time to answer your questions. Okay. The question is, what are your thoughts on Pure Gold? For Pure Gold, definitely, if you take a look at the share price right now, it seems like undervalued siya, right? But we have to remember kasi looking at the fundamentals, there are a lot of undervalued names. Most of the stocks listed in the Philippine Stock Exchange are undervalued. Right? For Pure Gold's case kasi what we are worried about is on the margins cost side, especially yung SNR business contributing significantly already. So the impact sa margins kasi import import siya. So the cost side is what we're concerned about. So for Pure Gold, put on our watch list but not currently a top priority. Okay, so next question, is your target price also your fair value for the stock? Yes. It's the target price are fair value for the stock. So yun yung parang target namin. At least yun yung dapat niyang fair value within the next 12 months. Now, it's not necessarily what we think will be the value in the next 12 months. It's what we think the value should be within the next 12 months. So that's how we look at it. So next question is, SMPH REIT, is it possible this year? We have been hearing that it is possible this year. parang best case scenario fourth quarter of the year. But that's best case scenario. They're still talking about it in terms of timing. But we have to take into account na timing is paramount for IPOs, especially big IPOs. Kasi you're trying to raise funds and if the market is not doing well, likely ma-undervalue ka ng market eh. So timing is key rin for IPOs. Especially in daming big IPOs. Like there's option probably si Prime Infra rin, mag-IPO. Tutuloy IPO this year. So those are big IPOs. So hopefully, let's see, hopefully the best na lang sa kanila. Do you consider PNB as an undervalued stock? PNB is actually one of the undervalued names sa PSE, right? But the PNB kasi, it's one bank na I was referring to earlier in terms of non-performing loans. They have higher non-performing loans as compared to the industry. Well, it nag-normalize naman na siya during the course of the pandemic. But the point here is, of course, if magkaroon ulit ng that type of economic crisis, right? That goes to show na yung quality of loans si PNB has to improve. So it makes other banks look more investable than them. That's the thing. That's why they remain to be that undervalued. So while they are undervalued right now, it's not necessarily a top priority to accumulate. Okay, so we have questions also on Converge. So what are the possible catalysts for Converge to reverse from its current downtrend? Do you still see Converge as a good company for long hold? For currently kasi our target price for Converge is 15.50. For Converge kasi, we have to si Converge para sa AC Energy dito. When prices went up significantly noong 2021, if I'm not mistaken, it already priced in what it's doing now. 'Di ba? So yung ang dami na yung growth prospects nila, right? So it's no surprise anymore. The one issue for Converge is the residential, it's called the residential subscription additions. It's not doing as expected, right? Because, well, of course, so when we went sa Mindanao, we parang yung comment doon, parang hirap sila to capture market outside Luzon. Kasi yung Luzon, when Converge, nung matunog si Converge, we have to take into account na yung exposure niya mostly sa Luzon lang. But of course, where the growth is outside Luzon, and they're finding it hard out to really penetrate those markets. Plus, kasi the strategy nila during the pandemic was they removed yung prepayment. Yung problem, di ba parang same sa property, same sa residential, tinanggal yung prepayment, ang daming hindi makabayad. Ang daming nagka-cancel ng subscription. Parang ginawang trial lang, right? So that's one issue. And right now, binalik na rin yung prepayment. So yung residential subscription additions nila is normalizing pababa. So the growth prospect for Converge is still there. It's more on, we have to see the numbers. If we have to see the numbers reflect, right? So that's for Converge. Okay. Next is any thoughts on the Alternergy IPO? Yeah, it's very interesting. Well, one thing for Alternergy, it's part of trending right? It's part of the renewable energy. But now there are a lot of renewable energy listed already in the PSE. Now you can easily compare. For Alternergy, again, the growth prospect is there, mga ganon. But right now, where liquidity in the market is not historically par, meaning it's not mababa yung volume. Kasi nga, takot pa yung mga tao. Investors or especially traders will likely prioritize names. Sino ba yung leading? Sino ba yung number one? Sino ba yung maganda yung prospects? Number two, sino ba yung marami na na-establish? Right? For Alternergy kasi, it's still getting there. It's not that big. But of course, the prospect is there. But I think lang based from what I've seen sa market, baka hindi pa na-prioritize yung Alternergy. Probably in the first days of the market, they can trade it. But in terms of investing for the long term, unless market sentiment and volume improve, diba? Si Alternergy will less likely outperform as you would have want to expect from it. But the thing is, okay siya eh. Kasi I believe meron rin siyang battery energy storage system. So at least meron na siya nun. Or at least in the pipeline, one of the few names na nasa pipeline yun. So good for them. But of course, they have to execute well because they still have a lot of projects na are in the pipeline but have not yet really come online yet. So execution, I mean, may execution risk pa. What if ma-delay? Diba? Kasi usual yun eh. So, pag ikaw yung investor, usually mga traders, yung mindset, pa-prioritize mo na sino ba yung naka-execute na, di ba? So, that's one factor. But yeah, something to put on your watch list kasi I mean, like I've said, renewable energy is the future, it's the present and the future. Ayun. Next question is, ito, renewable energy rin, any thoughts, SPNEC? For SPNEC kasi, ito one of the brighter prospects definitely, right? Kumbaga waiting for execution na lang rin yan eh for a lot of investors to come in more. But the valuation of the company already partially reflects that, right? For SPNEC kasi like besides kasi yung Solar Philippines business itself kasi I mean it's not new. I mean as compared to other renewable energy names, ito si Solar Philippines marami na na-establish. And the future is bright. But kasi it's like AC energy na or it's like Converge na if may slight disappointment lang, madali bentahan kasi the expectation is so high, right? Solar Philippines, right? Partnered with Rason, right? 'Di ba? 3 gigawatts, 'di ba? Yung one project. So sobrang laki. So yung Terra Solar. So it would definitely meet a lot of demand and it's the supply that the country needs. Hindi lang want, it's a need. So the future is definitely bright for SPNEC. But of course, like I've said, as a stock, it leaves little room for disappointment kasi madelay lang yung project, magkaroon lang ng execution issues, bebentahan yan talaga kasi the price already reflects partially what is expected from it. So we have to take that into account. Na yung stock market it looks forward, diba? Next question is for Jollibee. Yeah, what are the thoughts on Jollibee? For Jollibee, our target price for Jollibee is 260 pesos. Right? For Jollibee kasi, I mean, definitely economically opening, for sure. It's an economically opening, not only in the Philippines, but globally. I would like to share na recently I've been in the US to finish yung master's ko, right? And I went dun sa Times Square sa New York. And grabe, like, if gusto ko mag-order ng meal, it takes you have to wait at least 15 to 30 minutes to get your food. Yung pwede mo lang makuha agad is yung mango pie, di ba? So, it's a good signal. It's a good signal. But of course, during a time of high inflation, si Jollibee naman, kahit nagtataas yan ng presyo, it cannot increase at the same time na tumataas yung cost. So may times na inabsorb rin yung cost. So margins will also be an issue, not only sa Philippines but globally. Hence right now, nagko-consolidate lang siya. It's not significantly moving. But the bottom line here is the future is there. Just when you thought na saturated sa Philippines, ang dami ng branches sa Philippines, globally pala, no, dun yung upside niya. So Jollibee definitely good for long-term hold, but no, don't expect a lot for now. So, okay. Thoughts on Dito now? For Dito, I mean, the same for the growth names. A lot of what you expected before when the stock went to as high as 18, 20, yun na yung ngayon. Dumataas yung subscribers. But now, the realities here na yes, dumadami subscribers mo, but it's not, di pa siya kumikita. The company itself naman said na it will take some time a year or two bago sila maging profitable. So until that happens, right now, don't expect much sa share price. Sometimes kasi you have to take a look at the fundamentals, but you also have to take a look at what's reflected sa price. Hindi lang porket tumataas yung number of subscribers, good to expect mo aakyat rin yung stock price. It's not the case. Because again, the stock market is forward-looking. It's been already reflected, right? So for Dito, don't expect a lot from it now. Stock price-wise. Okay. So, ayun. Oh yeah, it's a good question. What's your view on video? Is it good to accumulate? For video naman, given our target price, good to accumulate when it pulls back to around 110, 108, mga ganun. But of course, that means we expect the market to pull back further. I mean, if it's that way, I mean, take advantage na lang for BDO kasi we have to take into account na yung the banks have outperformed this year. Yung financial sector outperform, it's actually up by double digit while the market is just flat. So outperform siya. So you wait, kasi BDO ang ganda ng share price niya. I mean, ano siya, buy and pull back talaga siya. If you want to be, kung nainip ka na, pwede ka bumili around 115. But ako, like, wait for the stock to pull back. Basta sa BDO naman, I mean, we like banks as a whole. It's just that we have to remain picky now. Especially kasi yung mga stocks nga na relatively expensive will likely underperform. While it may go up, not as high as other names, undervalued, but with the same prospect. Diba? So, diba, Security Bank nag-hit pa ng 100 pesos patas, but we've been recommending it since nasa 80s. Diba? Yeah. So, we have to stick with those names na may upside pa. Alright. So, what's our outlook on the hotel and leisure services sector? Yeah, for tourism, definitely it will come back. It's already coming back. Okay. Ang ganda ng rebound niya, no? But of course, if inflation continues to be this high, eventually mo hold back na rin yung mga tao. Right? So right now kasi, as we mentioned, we expect demand to be resilient in the first half. Because there's still a spillover from the previous year na we're really excited to go back outside to spend at least may mga trabaho during the course of the pandemic. Daming naipon kasi di nakalabas. Hopefully yung mga hindi nakagastos with medical expenses, nakaipon. Right? So they will spend that during the course of like in the first half, at least until the first half of 2023. But of course, if inflation continues to remain this high, hold back ka na rin eventually. So titipid ka na rin kasi alam mo yun. So hopefully it's dependent na rin on inflation. So for this time around, okay yung outlook for hotel leisure services, but our expectation is demand will normalize the second half. So let's see. The next question is, will industry-related companies make a good comeback this year, like DNL, MY, GTCAP? For DNL, ako personally, one of the playbook picks ko si DNL. Kasi for DNL kasi it can easily pass on costs to its clients. Kasi yung mga clients niya, sina Jollibee, Boysen, tapos si Jollibee, Boysen yung bahala on how will they pass on prices. Si DNL kasi mga chemists yan sila yung formula, yung yung ingredients ng chicken, etc. Sila yung gumagawa for that. They're the ones on the behind the scenes. So we be like DNL kasi it can easily just pass on cost. Tapos meron pa silang tinatayong facility sa Batangas. So it will help their margins. Diba? Mas magiging cost efficient sila. For MY naman, it depends on construction. The construction kasi right now wala na siyang airport business. It will only depend on the construction business. So for construction kasi, I mean, it's dependent also on our outlook sa residential. I mean, it doesn't only build naman residential. So, it also creates yung mga terminals, diba, office. So, siguro baka next year pa siya fully magka-comeback. Kasi nga, if this year, we expect yung mga launches to be delayed, baka next year mas fully siya ma-realize. For GT Capital naman, yeah, I mean, we're part of the group so we don't have an outright target price for GT Cap. But in terms of outlook, kasi mostly banks, property. So yung banks, okay. Yung property, yung target niya kasi right now luxury, high-end talaga. So less sensitive. For the cars naman, ang laki ng rebound ng vehicle sales. No? So that's good. So hopefully, as time goes by, I mean, if magkaroon ng economic slowdown, perhaps yung vehicle sales will normalize. So that's one. So yeah, I mean, we have to take those into account. So GT Cap, okay siya, undervalued. But what I say kasi usually pag holding companies, you try to prioritize if the unit itself has a better outlook. So for Metrobank, perhaps you can directly buy Metrobank. But if you want an exposure sa property, banks, diba, and vehicles, si GT Cap perhaps could be an investment for you. But yeah, just keep in mind what I mentioned about DNL. So one last question. Okay, I like this question. So your thoughts on the MSCI deletion of ASEAN and Globe? Any idea how long for these two stocks to bounce? It should start bouncing from here. Kasi usually, yung effectivity date niya is today. So usually, yung last day of it going down was supposedly Feb 28. So now, expect the stock to rebound. But ano lang, partially lang rin. It will be dependent pa rin sa fundamentals. For AC Energy kasi, I mean, expensive pa, right? Good prospect, definitely. But it remains to be expensive. For Globe naman, ang ganda ng support level niya, nasa 1.7. So, could be a good trading opportunity. But again, as mentioned, the mobile business remains to be competitive. So, ako, trading lang. Yun. So that's it. No, thank you everyone for questions. You can email us or watch out for our next events. Take a look at our reports sa website. So thank you everyone. See you next month. And this has been Royce Aguilar, Department Head for Retail Research. And as always, in First Metro Securities, it's #YourFutureFirst. So thank you.